Welcome to What's for Lunch? Conversations about trends and trade in food and ag and how that affects what is on your plate. This podcast brings relevant information in a unique way, relevant to food businesses, farmers, and consumers. Unique in that it approaches relevant issues from a different angle. I'm Susan Burns, your lunchtime host and your on-call business lawyer. Our motto is always interesting, always lively, and today is no exception to that. We're talking to Sari Kimball. She's the founder of Food Business Success, and today we're talking about some of the top 10 mistakes food businesses make, and more importantly, how to avoid those mistakes. Sari's mission is to help packaged food and beverage entrepreneurs grow into profitable businesses. And to do that, she brings over 15 years of food business experience to help you navigate the very complex and intricate consumer packaged goods industry. In 2006, Sari established her own food business consulting agency for the purpose of making her food experience work for you. Her experience includes branding, purchasing, wholesale, grocery retail at Whole Foods Market, and starting her own food business and managing a commissary kitchen. Quite a diverse background, which brings you a unique and multifaceted approach that Sari uses to your advantage. In addition to consulting, Sari offers Food Business Success, which is an online course that includes a private coaching component. And this course helps food entrepreneurs create personalized roadmaps for success and also helps avoid the pitfalls that so many food businesses make. Welcome, Sari.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. What a nice intro.
Yeah, it's a great background. So we're happy to have you here, and I know that the food businesses that listen to this podcast will benefit greatly. And as I was reading through your bio and looking at your website and reading about some of the things you do and going through some of your downloads, I was just wondering what motivated you to start working with food businesses? What is it that made you step out and say, you know what, I've got to do this?
Yeah, right. It's kind of an interesting niche to go into. I actually started my food, kind of my deep dive into food on a farm. So I'm very acquainted with some of the farming agriculture issues. But between the farm and then working for Whole Foods Market and just having a passion for local food and really wanting to help those local producers succeed on the shelves at Whole Foods Market. When I left there, I knew that was the customer that I had a real passion for, and it took me a little while to kind of get there. Like you said, I managed a commissary kitchen. I kind of tried my own food business and learned a lot from that experience. But I was pretty broad. I was still working with restaurants and farms. And then eventually I decided to really get into just really working with the startup consumer packaged good producer, because I feel like that is such a great way to change our food industry and help local economies. And so I just have a real heart for them, and especially helping them get started is a real passion for me.
That's great, and it's so needed, very very needed. I see that in my work as well as an attorney working with startups and businesses in growth mode. And is there anything, when you started your own consulting business and your food business success program, is there anything in particular as you started working with entrepreneurs that surprised you?
I think just the how much it takes, both not necessarily, I mean, to some extent in money, but in time and dedication and commitment to start a food business. I think there's a notion that because we all eat and food is so easy to share with each other in a personal setting, in a private setting, that there's a an idea that it should be easy to start a food business, and it is, that's far from the truth. And so just that surprise around how much it's going to take to really have a successful food business.
So going from a great salsa or whatever it is that everybody loves and says you should start your own company and sell this, to actually realizing how very much work it is.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
and
Well,
it seems like it should be easy.
right, right. We do all eat some of the best times in life are around
Absolutely.
food. Yeah. So I was going through your top 10 list and I wanted to pick through a few of them today. I think they're all really critical and important, but one I wanted to start with is not pricing your product correctly from the start. Just talk about that a little bit, and how do people avoid that mistake?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is really understanding your cost of goods sold. So if you're not familiar with that term, it's often abbreviated as COGS. But there are four things that go into your cost of goods sold, and it's your ingredients, your packaging, and then your active time to make that product and your active time to package that product. So in order to have something to sell, that's your cost of goods sold. And then the second part of that, so you get that cost, but then people make the mistake of just pricing it for like a farmer's market to start, and they think, oh, I'm making 50% margin, that's great. But if their goal is to go into distribution, to go into wholesale, you need to price through that whole business model instead of just one at a time, because I see where people get into trouble when they do want to go into wholesale, that they haven't priced their product, they priced it too low, and then they don't make any money when they want to go into distribution and they have to raise their prices, and nobody likes that.
Right. We don't like the price increases, consumers.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in the cost of goods sold, I imagine many people starting out don't think to include their time when they're calculating.
Labor's definitely the one that gets left out. And I realize that when you're starting out, you're not writing a check to yourself. But again, that's planning for the future and saying, if I'm going to have a profitable business, eventually I need to be paying myself, or I want to pay somebody else to make this product so that I can do other things in my business. So you really do need to factor that in right from the start.
Mhm.
And it's okay if it kind of gets moved around in the early stages, but it needs to be a part of that pricing model, because then you have a true cost, and then you can figure out what your margins need to be so that everybody's happy.
Right, right. And then that's one of the things that you help food entrepreneurs do, is to calculate what that should be, even though they may not be
Exactly.
paying themselves yet. Yeah,
Right.
that's great.
Yeah.
But and that's kind of
And
that pricing component, and thinking about expanding into, if you want to go into the wholesale market, if you really want to grow your business, not having a plan for growing sales, which is your point number three. I think
correct.
that
Yeah. They
price
definitely go together.
segues right into that. I guess that's why you have it that way on your list. But let's talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Again, I think that there's a tendency when you're starting out as an early stage entrepreneur to just, it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall, and seeing what sticks. And so the more you can get clear on what's a 1 year plan? Do I want to start with farmers markets? Do I want to start with e-commerce? You can have a blend, but you can't do everything, and you can't be everything to everyone. So you got to kind of start with a short-term plan, and then also what do you want that to look like? And I usually go for 3 years. And not everybody wants to be in wholesale or in grocery stores, and that's fine. But looking ahead, if you're really going to make this a profitable business, what is your 3 year goal? So do you want to be in grocery stores? Do you want to be do you want to be local? Do you want to be regional? Do you want to be national? And the more you can plan ahead for that, the better you are at using your resources, instead of being like, oh, I'll try this. And then you just invested a bunch of money and then you switch to the next shiny object, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, so I imagine that's a little bit tricky to navigate, especially if you're the person running the business, because it in any business, at least as far as I've seen, it's a sort of an iterative process, and you make a plan and you're going one direction, and then as you're going down that path, you see, oh, well, this doesn't exactly make that much sense. So when
right.
is it a good time to switch, and when is it a shiny object syndrome kind of thing? Like, I think
Yeah.
that's it would be one of the important points of having a consultant, food business consultant like you that knows what they're doing from the
Yeah,
outside.
exactly. Yeah. I find that a lot of people, because food is democratic, so democratic, we all eat and many of us love to cook and share with other people, um, that people just want to get started and just make their salsa or their cookies or their jam, and just that's what they're passionate about, of course. Um, but they don't have a real understanding of the food industry and how it works. And so, yeah, having somebody that can kind of help explain how does going onto a wholesale, onto a grocery store shelf, how does that work? What kind of prices are they gonna, what kind of margins will they need if you want to go into distribution? So getting that food industry knowledge is really critical. I mean, I work with engineers and with teachers and people who are not in the food industry. They didn't grow up in this industry as a career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and I also want to talk about another one of your points that has to do with this sort of uh, planning and pricing and expanding, and it's from the beginning. I think this is
Right.
a very critical one of you have not defining your brand from the start.
Yeah. So again, I think the fun part of starting a food business is, of course, making your food, for most people. So they just want to jump right in. They typically will, make a brand, make a logo, choose packaging based on their own preferences, because they just want to get a product out there. And that's okay to start that way. I mean, it happens, especially if you're starting small, and maybe you can do Cottage Food Act, or you want to start, just at farmers markets. But doing that work, I find people don't do that at the beginning. They just jump into making their product. But if you can step back and say, who's my target customer? And oftentimes it may not be you as the one making it.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, it's funny how that works. And so, stepping back and saying, who's my target customer? And then what is my brand identity around that? Like your personality. If I were to meet your brand, on the street at a cocktail party, how would they speak? What would they be wearing? Their tone of voice, all these kind of personality traits. So, I think it's really important if you don't do it at the beginning, go back and really get clear before you start scaling up and trying to go into a wholesale environment. Because it's one thing when you're at a farmer's market where you can talk to people and explain it and sample it and educate the consumer. But once you're on a shelf, you can't be there all the time. So your product has
Right,
to speak for
exactly.
you.
We speak the same language. Sorry, my blog post that I just put up this week and the one that for next week is all about this, and it's only from a naming perspective. It doesn't touch on
Mhm.
a lot of the logo design and trademarking and all that kind of stuff, but it's on the business name, and uh, rebranding is a huge cost that you can avoid to some extent. I think as you said, when you're growing a business, it might take on different forms and you might have different ideas, but it's that idea that what's personally significant to you may not sell in the marketplace, you know. And you want it, I think because an entrepreneur works really hard, as you and I both know. We're both entrepreneurs as well as
Yeah.
advising other entrepreneurs, and we work really hard. So you have to feel good about what you're doing. So I think it's important to have some connection to your branding, and you have to like it as
Absolutely.
well, but and it
Right.
has to make you feel good or smile when you look at it, even if you might want to throw something but at that particular moment. But I think it's important to like it, but again, the the big personal connection isn't what most consumers are concerned about. Right.
Right. And I think that just speaks to, you have to be willing to pivot and be open to those kind of suggestions. I think the entrepreneur that just says it's my way and this is what it's going to be, that it's hard to accelerate your growth if you're not open to change and to feedback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
You get stuck in your own echo chamber, right? Like don't just ask your friends and family.
exactly. So that, and again, a nice segue into point number 10, the hard work and the dedication that it takes to truly launch an overnight success. You hear everybody say, oh yeah, everybody thinks I'm an overnight success. Yeah, 10 years, that's a long night. But your point number 10, going it alone, is another
Right.
mistake you see with food business entrepreneurs. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny. I live in Colorado, and so Justin's nut butter is kind of the golden child that everybody looks to and says, it's an overnight success. Look how, amazing that business is. And he started at a farmer's market, 10, 12 years ago. It was definitely not an overnight success, but
Yeah,
easy to look at it.
what do you see as a average timeline for starting at the farmer's market or wherever you start to, having a financially sustainable business where you think, okay, this is a
Yeah.
go. Is there a
Right.
time frame for that you see?
I typically advise people to give it at least 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I do talk with clients or potential clients who, by all indications, it looks like they're doing really well, but they actually haven't paid themselves in 4 years. They're trying to figure that out. So I think the more you can start early with getting help and not going it alone, like we'll talk about, then you can kind of you can avoid some of those pitfalls and things that slow you down. But I think I usually say, you're going to have to give it 3 years. And is that something that you really want to do and that you're really committed to? And it doesn't mean you have to be a national brand on every, Target shelf or Whole Foods Market shelf to be profitable. It's just that, you need to know what your goals are, and then we can build a model that will help you be profitable based on your
Mm-hmm.
goals.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's typically where I start with people, and sometimes I think that surprises them. It doesn't mean you're necessarily losing money, but it does. You always are going to pay yourself last.
Right. Right.
Typically out of the
Or
profit.
better,
So
especially if you're attracting investors, you better be paying yourself last.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So in not going it alone, aside from having professionals, I think every business
Mhm.
should have an industry consultant, in this case, a food business consultant, a CPA, and a lawyer. Those are my three go-tos for every
Right.
business that's serious about growth. Besides engaging professionals, which and usually budgets
Mhm.
are tight, but still it has to be
Right.
budget. What are other things that entrepreneurs can do so that they're not so isolated and they can avoid that mistake of, as you said, just hanging out in their own echo chamber?
Right. Well, I think, a lot of times food business entrepreneurs, this is new to them. They are new to entrepreneurship. And like you said, it is so much work. Like you don't even, you can't even comprehend when you start how much work being an entrepreneur is and how much fun it is too. It's a great thing to do, but I think we all could probably use coaching and mentorship in just how to be a good entrepreneur. So finding networks and groups that in maybe their industry groups, like in Colorado, we have one called Naturally Boulder. There's other organizations, I'm sure you guys have some there, where it is other food brands or natural product brands that get together and they can talk about, you know, their trials and also their successes, but help each other through those. So I just think, you know, getting, and then maybe also joining some kind of entrepreneurship meetups or mastermind groups. Like, you're going to have to work on your head as much as your business, because being an entrepreneur is risky. You have to put yourself out there in new ways and you're probably going to fail multiple times, right?
Yeah.
So getting, you know, getting with peers and mentors who can help you through that. It's really important.
Well, and I think out of failures often come the most brilliant successes, and I see that working with clients too. Like even in cases where people don't dot the I's and cross the T's and do have to do a rebrand and it's super expensive, probably usually is at a point where they can't afford it, you know, in a growth spot where resources are really stretched. But it sometimes is what helps relaunch the business and take off, makes it take off in a whole different way. Or, you know, personally, I know I can think of times where I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? This is the worst possible thing. And then it turns out to be exactly what I needed, but points you in a different direction. And I guess that also, I think that entrepreneurial people are also on a journey of self-discovery as much as they are of, you know, discovering how to get their product out into the market. And I think that that's part and parcel of it. So I like your idea of mastermind. And I mean, being a lawyer, people find it odd that I recommend, you know, make sure you get exercise and do meditate. If you don't,
right.
Well, I don't have time and I can't, and that's not, you know, do 2 minutes, you know, just start. Because it can be very isolating, as you say, and a lot of work. And that makes me go back to your very first point, is loving what you do.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, unless you are just independently wealthy, and you're starting this with a whole bunch of money, which that is not the case for most food brands, you are going to have this deep passion for your product, because that's what's going to sustain you. That I call it your compelling reason, right? Like, what is going to sustain you when you are at the commissary kitchen at 11 p.m. bottling your product and up early, getting ready for a farmer's market, you know, like and you worked a 40-hour week at your other job. So there's going to be that haul for a while where you got to really hustle, and it's just probably going to be you or you know, you and a partner or something like that, and you're going to be wearing all the hats. And you're going to ask yourself frequently, why am I doing this again? And so you really have to love your product and love, you know, the problem it's solving, or the, you know, whether it's like a dairy free or, you know, gluten free or some, you know, you're solving a problem around a dietary need and you really have a passion for that, or you're just bringing like joy to people, you know, when they taste your food. And so that's got to really get you through those tough times in the early stages.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Your why.
The why, so important. Yep.
Yes, critical.
And it does, you know, it doesn't matter what your goals are. Like I said, it doesn't have, not every food brand has to be the big national brand by any means. You can still be successful, but ultimately, yeah, that love of your product is so key to keep you going in those early years.
Yeah. You know, I agree with everything you said, and I'm just wondering, you know, sometimes when I'm talking to people and they're like, "Oh, I don't need a lawyer. I'll just learn about it online, or I just download
Right.
this or that," and I I try to stop from freaking, but because that is so, in my experience, is so much more costly and damaging to the business to try to do that because you're not trained as a lawyer. I am. I
Right.
I'm not trained as a food business. I know some things about food law, but I don't know how to grow a food business.
Right.
So do you experience that where people saying, "Well, I'll figure it out myself," and how do you respond to that if you do?
Yeah, yeah, I do. And again, I think, going back to the very first question you asked me, what's most surprising is that I think people think that starting a food business should be really easy. And yes, you can get a lot of, Google how to start a food business and you'll find some resources, but it can quickly get overwhelming and you get totally different answers from different, whoever you ask. So then you don't know, am I doing this correctly? Am I not? What comes first? What comes second? Um, so yeah, I do get that a lot. And I get it. Like people are bootstrapping, they're, working their other jobs. They just, they want to kind of try this out and feel it out. And that's fine. I try to provide a ton of resources at no charge, for free, because I just want food brands to be successful at whatever stage they're at. And then hopefully when they do realize that they need some expertise and someone to ask, then they'll come and talk with me. But that's also why I created Food Business Success, which is the online platform, where there's mini courses, there's an accelerator, and there's a monthly membership option with me to get to get group coaching and consulting, so that it is at a lower price point for the early stage entrepreneur, the ones that are like, no, I got this. I'm just gonna do some research online, and they and I always say, and I'm sure you're in the situation too. It's like I see people throw away thousands of dollars because of mistakes that they made, and that it's like, oh my, they question the cost of a consultant or a lawyer or a class. And then down the road, it's like, oh my gosh, we could have saved you, you could have
Right.
paid for that work and not lost all of this money and time and opportunity.
Right. Well, I had people come into my house thinking, "Don't say I told you so," but they're usually, sometimes we're human, right? So sometimes we have to learn the hard way, and I find a lot of clients in my office were after having learned the hard way to that, it's not something to go do it on your own, and also like for example, a form that you can fill out online to make your own contract or something misses a lot of nuance that a lawyer interviewing would understand. And I'm guessing it's the
Yeah.
same in the food business when you're trying to make sure your labels are right or you're following regulatory processes or something about your branding and health claims and those kinds of things that you may be able to find some place to fill out forms online, but there are oftentimes nuances that those of us with experience in our area can guide you through that will save you a lot of mistakes and money and frustration down the line.
Right.
Did I get
And
that?
just missed opportunities too, because when you have to go back and
Exactly.
fix something, it's, what are the opportunity costs that you're missing out on because now you have to, go back and
Well, and
fix
that's the
it.
other thing. Those mistakes take a lot of time to fix.
You do.
Yeah.
So it's a challenging thing to help early stage food entrepreneurs understand that they don't know what they don't know yet. Um, and so I do find the ones that are the most successful are the ones who can step back and say, I don't know everything, and I'm going to flatten my learning curve by getting some help
Right.
in these areas. And if they choose not to, then they choose not to, and that's okay too. And then I typically will meet them in year 2 or 3 when they realize that they're not making any money and they're burnt out and they're wondering whether what they need to do to grow, or do they need to close their business. So I'd love to work with people right at the very beginning so we don't have to do that, but that's also where people are typically finally willing to pay for a consultant, unfortunately.
Right, and that's where you really have the passion for what you're doing when you've slogged it out and you're like, I can't take this anymore, but I love what I'm doing. I'm not giving up. And that
Right.
is really, I think, that tenacity and that stick-to-itiveness is what I see as the sort of the single most important element of every successful entrepreneur, is the never, ever, ever giving up kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
sorry, what does if food businesses are successful or not, how does that affect what's on the plate of the consumer? How does that impact us as people who eat?
Yeah. I mean, I think I have a real passion for making an impact on our food industry and our food system. And I think the more we can support these food business entrepreneurs who are creating better tasting food, who are they're supporting local farms, they're increasing their food sustainability and in their communities. I mean, we're all better off. We have more choices. We have innovation, new ideas, and we just have access to, I think, a lot, in many cases, healthier, but at the very least, less processed food when we can support our food business entrepreneurs. So
Mhm.
I love it.
Yeah, that's a good reason. Well, that comes through in your conversation here. Sorry, tell people where they can find you, where they can download this brilliant top 10 list, and where they can find out more about your food business success course.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned, I try to give a ton of resources away. So, if you go to foodbizsuccess.com, you can get the 10 mistakes. I also started a YouTube channel and have been putting short videos up that address a lot of, some of these starting a food business questions. And there's a business checklist you can get from there. I also have a ton of resources on my consulting page, which is sarikimble.com. And if you go to start a business, then you can get access to all these links and resources. I want people to be successful, whether they choose to, work with me or not, for the reasons I just said, because we have more choice and we get better food for everyone. So yeah, you can pick up all of those things. And then I do offer mini courses that I'm starting. So I have the accelerator, the 6-week program that will start every few weeks. We'll probably start in the next one in July. But you can start with some of the mini courses and then apply that to the accelerator. And then I also offer the monthly consulting membership. So that way you can get access to an expert, me, for a couple times a month to be able to ask your questions in a group setting. So I think that's really valuable, at the very least, to have access to an expert.
Yes, I agree. That's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
most awesome. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and I find it very informative. And I hope that podcast listeners of What's for Lunch do as well. And thank you so much. Sorry. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
you're so welcome. And thanks for having me. And I love what you're doing. And so thanks for letting me come on your show. It's been great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our next podcast episode is on the airing on June 6th, and it's with attorney Kate Graham. And she is going to talk about things that you don't probably know about sustainable farm leases and some unique and flexible rent terms that you probably haven't considered. So farm for landowners and farmers who are renting, you're going to want to catch that one. And again, thank you to Sari Kimball for delighting us today with some of her top 10 tips or top 10
You're
mistakes that
welcome.
food businesses make and how to avoid those tips for avoiding those. And go to Food Business Success foodbizsuccess.com to download that and many other helpful resources. We wish you the most of success. Thank you.
Thank you.